Okay, let's get warmed up today with our math warm up. You'll see that we have 5 problems here, and we are adding and subtracting fractions. So if you take a look at our first one, we have 1/2 plus 1/8. Now, what do you know about adding fractions that is really, really important? Hopefully you are thinking to yourself, I need to have the same denominator. And notice that none of these have the same denominator, which means you might need to pull out your fraction circles or a fraction number line, or you might need to come up with some equivalent fractions, something to think about there. So go ahead and pause your video and see if you can't figure out how to solve each one of these problems. So if we use fraction circles to figure out this first problem, you'll notice that I have the fraction circle for 1/2 here, and I have the fraction circles for 1/8 here, but they're not the same size, so we're going to have to do some trading. So we're going to get rid of the half, and we're going to trade it for 8ths. So now we have both of them as 8ths. Now if we think about 1/2, 1/2 would have all of these shaded in, right? All of that would be 1/2, and this would be 1/8. So now we can take a look at those pieces and put them together. So we're going to add that 1/8 to this. This is going to give us our final answer, which is going to be 5/8. Did you get the correct answer? All right, let's take a look at the next one. So if we take a look at the second problem, you'll notice that we have 3/4 here, and we're subtracting 2/3. So when I take out my fraction circles and make 3/4 and make 2/3, it's almost impossible to figure out how do I subtract that. So what I would have to do is find some fraction circle pieces that would be equivalent to both of those. So as you can see down here, I have grabbed my 12ths and filled in what would be equivalent to 3/4 in the 12ths and what would be equivalent to 2/3 in the 12ths as well. Now remember, we're subtracting, so we're going to subtract how many of those? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 12ths. So we're going to cross out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those, which leaves us with 1/12 as our answer. That one was a little bit more complicated, wasn't it? So we had to make some trades, and we had to then look to see what would be equivalent fractions. So let's take a look at number 3. All right, so now let's take a look at number 3. We have 4/5 and 1/4. And when we put those in fraction circles and we're adding them together, our pieces do not match at all. So 1/4 would take up this space here, and as you can see, our pieces don't match up, and we'd have a sliver of this piece equal to that 1/4 piece. So we've got to figure out a way that we can actually add those two fractions together because they do not have the same denominator. So one way would be to multiply our denominators and come up with equivalent fractions. So if I have 4/5 and I'm adding 1/4, let's say that we take each side times, or this side times 4, which is going to give us 16/20. And on this side, we're going to take it times 5, which would give us 5/20. And now we have the same denominator, and we can add those together, which is going to give us 21/20, or 1 1/20 as our final answer for that one. So in this instance, we created an equivalent fraction for each of the fractions that we were adding that had the same denominator. And as we take a look at number 4, we're going to run into the same issue with that one and number 5. So let's see how you did with those. Okay, so let's wrap this up by looking at number 4 and number 5. So in number 4, we had 1/4 minus 3/12. Again, we need to have a common denominator. So what I did was I took 1/4 and I made an equivalent fraction of 3/12. And then I didn't have to change this one because it already had the denominator of 12. So in this instance, it would be 3/12 minus 3/12, which then gives us 0. Number 5, we have 9/16 minus 1/12. Now these are some pretty big denominators. So what I did was I came over here and I took 16 times 2 to see, is that a multiple of 12? It is not. And then we did 16 times 3, which is 48. I know that 48 is a multiple of 12, so I found a denominator that I could use to convert each of these fractions where they would have a common denominator but an equivalent fraction. So 9/16 is going to turn into 27/48, and 1/12 is going to turn into 4/48. So when we subtract those, we have 27 minus 4, which gives us the 23 as our numerator, and of course our denominator stays the same. So we have an answer of 23/48 for that one. So as you can see, this can get a little complicated. So our math message today is solving addition problems with fractions, some of them with the same denominator, some of them not. So if we take a look at the first one, we have 3/5 plus 1/5. So this one should be pretty easy because they have the same denominator. So all we have to do is add our numerators. So that one's going to give us 4/5. But when we look at the next one, we have 1/2 plus 1/4. So again, you can use your fraction circles, you can use number lines, you can use a drawing, or if you want to make equivalent fractions, you can do that as well. So what I am going to do is have you pause your video, go ahead and solve number 2 and number 3, and when you're ready, come back and let's check your work. All right, for number 2, what I did was I took 1/2 and I made an equivalent fraction of 2/4. So now I have 2/4 plus 1/4. They have the same denominator. So now I'm able to add my numerators and get 3/4 as my answer. How did you do with that one? All right, let's take a look at number 3. So with number 3, you'll notice that I took 1/4 and I made an equivalent fraction of 3/12. Now, why did I pick 12 as my denominator? Because I know 12 is a multiple of 4 and 12 is a multiple of 3. So when we're looking for a denominator that we can use with both fractions, it usually helps to think about multiples so that we know where to begin. So 1/4 is going to turn into 3/12. And 1/3 is going to turn into 4/12. We add our numerators together, 3 plus 4. That gives us 7/12 as our final answer. How'd you do? All right, our lesson today, if you have not figured it out, is using equivalent fractions to find common denominators. So why are we doing this? Well, we are doing this to be able to add and subtract fractions. We have to know strategies to help us do that. And when we don't have a common denominator, we have to figure out some other ways to go about that. So we're going to use fraction circles and we're going to exchange them. We're also going to take a look at how to do that using a multiplication rule for equivalent fractions. So I got a couple of things that I'd like you to look at here. So first of all, we're going to look at this side here where we have the pictures of the fraction circles. And notice here I have the fraction circle for 1/4, and here's the fraction. And then we have the fraction circle for 1/3, and here's the fraction. We want to add those together, but they don't have the same denominator. So that means that I need to find something that they have in common. So notice we have then changed our denominator to 12, and 1/4 is equal to 3/12, and over here 1/3 is equal to 4/12. So now we are able to add those together because we have the same denominator. So we're going to add our 3 plus our 4, which gives us 7/12. So this would be using fraction circles to help us in our finding the answer to our problem. Another way is to use the multiplication rule for equivalent fractions. So that's what we have here in this table. And you'll notice that it says multiply both the numerator and denominator by, and we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So our starting fraction was 1/4, which again in our original problem, we're going to take 1/4 and we're going to multiply each the numerator and the denominator by 2. So this is what they're doing here in this box. So we've got 1 times 2 and 4 times 2, which is going to give us 2/8, which is an equivalent fraction for 1/4. We can also then take 3 and multiply it times the numerator and the denominator and come up with 3/12. We can then try 4. We're going to multiply numerator and denominator, come up with the fraction 4/16. And then we're going to do the same thing with the number 5. We're going to multiply numerator and denominator by 5, which will give us 5/20. So again, this was our starting fraction of 1/4. We multiplied 2, 3, 4, and 5 times both numerator and denominator to come up with equivalent fractions. We're going to do the same thing with 1/3 because that was our second fraction in our original problem. We're going to multiply numerator and denominator by 2, come up with 2/6, multiply by 3, come up with 3/9, 4, 4/12, and 5, 5/15. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's practice a little bit with this strategy. And if you'd like to open up your workbook to page 154 in your student math journal, you should see these tables somewhere on that page. And we're going to practice doing some of this work. So notice that we've got a starting fraction of 1/2, and we're going to multiply both the numerator and denominator by 3. They did 2 for us up here. So we know if we use 2, we're going to come up with an equivalent fraction of 2/4. So now we're going to do 3, and then we're going to do 5. So I want you to go ahead and pause your video and see how you do. So let's take a look at how you did. I multiplied 1 times 3 and 2 times 3, which gave me 3/6 for the first one as my equivalent fraction. Then we took 5 times numerator and denominator and came up with 5/10. So now let's take a look at, we're going to take away this column here, and we're going to just try to figure out if I multiply top and bottom by 2, I'm going to fill in my blank spot here, multiply by 4, multiply by 6. So we're basically going to fill in these empty spots. So go ahead and pause your video and see how you do with these. So let's take a look at that first row for the fraction 2/3. I got 4/6. 8/12ths, and 12/18ths. How did you do? All right, let's take a look at 1/6. All right, looking at our answers here, you should have gotten 3/18ths, 5/30ths, and 6/36. Now let's take a look at the last row there for 1/3. And looking at that last row of answers there, you should have gotten 2/6, 4/12ths, and 6/18ths. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this. So let's summarize our lesson today. We have learned and discovered that we can only add or subtract fractions when they have common denominators. That means the same denominator. We also learned it is much easier to compare fractions with common denominators, and common denominators can be found using the multiplication rule. So there you have it. Take your time. Until next time, bye for now.